Welcome to the Collective Podcast, the podcast where we delve into the ever-evolving world of corporate security to help businesses stay ahead of the curve. Whether you're a small startup or a global enterprise, we're here to provide insights, strategies, and actionable advice to keep your organization safe and secure in a digital-first world. I'm your host, Jordi de Kok, working for the Collective, where we pride ourselves on a hands-on approach, working closely with our clients to cut through the noise and deliver the solutions they actually need. No unnecessary fluff, no overselling. Each episode, I'll be joined by experts, practitioners, and thought leaders diving into today's most pressing security challenges. Joining me today are Louis Mastelinck.
Hello.
Microsoft MVP in identity and access management and a strong believer that authentication should not be a struggle. And Adriaan Schepers.
Hoi hoi.
Modern workplace consultant looking for the right balance between security and business goals. Together, we'll unpack the whys and hows of password management and give you practical insights to implement immediately. And let me start by making a bold statement, gentlemen, and see if you guys agree. End users don't understand the importance of password management and thus don't use the tools in a correct manner. Do you agree?
110% yes.
I do agree, and I do think that talking about passwords and the existence of passwords could also bring us a lot in a very deep philosophical discussion, to be honest. But
okay. But isn't one of the biggest reasons, or what is the biggest reason why end users don't understand?
The main big reason that I think that passwords are so important to us and users aren't considering it to be a secure matter or are not protecting it enough by themselves is the fact that a password is the weakest link in our authentication flow. Mm-hmm. It's something we have to remember, it has to be unique, but we're kind of people, we're lazy. We try to use something that's, easy to remember, easy to type, not too complex. And as soon as you start playing around with the complexity, people start to complain. They say, 15 characters, what do I need to do? Well, for those 15 characters, they're going to say then I make something like, this is summer 2024. And then maybe if you do a password reset, or they'll try to reuse it all the time, or they're going to say something like, now it's 25? Well, I'll just make it 25. The fact that they need to use a password also limits them in how they work with it. They try to make it as simple as possible. And of course, we need to make it as simple as possible. We also have to make sure that we do it in a secure manner.
Mm-hmm. I also think it's a mix between not caring and not knowing. With caring, I mean truly caring about the security. In the end, a sales guy at a regular company doesn't care about security. They care about their sales goals. And they do not understand the complexities that are associated with passwords. They do not appreciate the complexities.
Can I add one more thing that we didn't mention yet? I also think it's more like, it has to be complex. So I just make one thing and I just have to remember one thing and I reuse it. Because I believe the biggest reason or the biggest fault or mistake companies make is they implement it and their users are just using the same passwords they use in private.
And the worst thing about that is they can have complex passwords, but what they will do is just write them down on a piece of paper, stick them under their keyboard. That's the worst thing to do.
Or they keep it in a OneNote.
Okay. Or in Excel.
So we do agree about that. Maybe let us begin with a question that a lot of our listeners will have now after we talked about this. Why would we as a company then invest in a password manager tool if our users aren't using it correct?
Let me start with a bold statement. Excel is not a password manager tool, but a lot of companies are using it that way.
Okay.
I worked at a company, for example, who stored all their passwords nicely in one Excel shared on a network drive. So there was the need to share passwords, but they were not aware of how to do it the right way.
Okay. And were only the shared passwords?
No.
Part of that? Okay, so even
personal passwords, because they believed when someone is sick or on a holiday, another person needs to be able to access their mailbox, for example.
Ooh. Louis, from a security standpoint, what goes into your mind?
No, I was not going to go deeper into that, but I was concerned, I believe unless you have all of your applications working with one single account and you only need to remember one type of password, I would say you don't need a password manager. But If you have multiple kind of applications who use multiple types of accounts, then you're in a pickle. Either you make sure that all of those applications use the same account, or you're going to use a password manager to ensure that you use different passwords, that you do not need to remember them, that you not need to see them, that you basically even don't need to manage them at all. I even don't know all of the passwords in my password manager. I just copy paste, and it works.
To add on to that, password managers can also store secrets, which is quite important. For example, one API key that gives you access to the whole kingdom, that also needs to be stored in a safe way.
The need of sharing a password, I think every company has that need. It's different when we're talking about IT folk or we're talking about end users. But eventually, the scenario of, hey, I have something that I want to share, but I don't want to paste it somewhere in Teams or in an email or something. I want to make sure that I pass it on to you and only to you. And if I share it, maybe I can make sure that Adriaan can only see it one time or for a couple of days. I think that is a very realistic scenario that every company has.
Even more if you say like, we just want to share it for a couple of days. I believe as well that people also have the limitations of self-destructing passwords. Like, oh, I'm going on a holiday, you need access to my kingdom or to my accounts. I'll just make a password that self-destructs after 2 weeks. You can use it to log in. Nobody else has access. So if something happens, I know it was you or whatever. But in the end, after 2 weeks, I cannot forget to get rid of the password or change the password. You do not have any access anymore because it self-destructed it.
Yeah. And a nice benefit too, scalability. We're not a one-man team. When you work in a company, you mostly work in a department. It's very easy if you set it up the right way to share passwords automatically with your team if needed.
Maybe I'm going to play the devil's advocate and say like, hey, but guys, I have something that's called like one-time secret. It's a website on Google. If you Google it, I can pretty much create a password and create a link and say like, if this link ever gets visited, well, after that first visitation, you can burn it and it has a temporary lifetime, let's say, of my URL. Well, why would I use that, or why wouldn't I want to use that?
From my perspective,
yeah,
I would say because it's public, it's standing on a public website, so there could be some guy that is intervening with your link or with your access to it, and that way he has access. I don't know, Adriaan may have another.
I don't say that all free products are bad, but it's a free product. What is their business model? At the end of the day, they do not care about your security.
Correct. And I mean, you're relying on a free product or a third party who's going to hopefully create or store your strings, whatever they are, safely. But to add on that, once I was Googling for one-time secret, and Google advertising, that you can pay to be on top. And what they did was they did one-time secret, but they did a little tweak to the domain, which actually pointed you to a malicious domain, and they were capturing all of the people entering their secrets in one-time secret. Meaning you're not safeguarded, being the fact that you're trying to access a public website, a third-party website, and you're not in control of who's creating which secret. Once I create that secret, it's gone. And hopefully it doesn't get leaked. It expires over time, because once I send it, I lose any control of it.
At the end of the day, the only authentication done is the URL. So it's real like security through obscurity, which is not security.
Yeah,
that's an example.
I've heard a lot about the ways hackers go through sponsored links. So I'm not surprised to hear that. Maybe a next question. What are the dangers companies can have if they don't use password manager tool? I think one of those is the one you just mentioned, a malicious link with all the good intentions of the user. He tried to make something that was disposable, but he just got, let us say, phished through a Google-sponsored website.
I think if we approach it from a more holistic approach, is like, why are passwords an issue, and why what's the security risk, is if you're not going to address the fact on how passwords are stored, you're going to get like what we call shadow IT. Just like the fact that if you're not giving a proper way to share your documents, your users are going to use many different ways on how they think they are going to do it right. If you provide them with a correct manner of like, hey user, this is where you store your password, this is how you share it, this is how you access it, this is how we make sure that it's secure and we can monitor. If you give them a proper use case, they can properly use it, and they won't be reaching out to any kind of different tools to do so. Getting that in order will alleviate many of your issues.
It's taking a proactive stance while at the same time improving your business efficiency, but also your security. And like Louis said, shadow IT. If you're not solving a problem for them, they will solve it by themselves.
They will try to solve it by themselves. Yeah, true. So as a CIO, CISO in a company, I actually have to hold my employees' hands and just tell them, like, this is what you need to do, this is why we use it, and just make sure they can't work around it.
If you make sure that your tool is accessible and they understand it, then 90% they'll use it.
Will be covered.
Will be covered.
Yeah.
It will be the 10% of people who's just trying to do edge cases or something else. You could say, like, I'm going to try to prevent that. Preventing people from storing clear text passwords is, well, it's tricky. It's tricky to do so. But I would say it's a big benefit to say, like, hey, use this password manager. Learn how to use it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe one of the next questions that's popping into my head if we're speaking about that is, won't users save their personal passwords in my work environment? Is there, well, there might be no real risk for me on that, but will they start using the password manager tool for personal benefit? Do I want that? Do I not want that?
One of the things some password providers do, or password managers do, it is they provide, when you buy a business license, they also provide a private or family license, allowing us to really make that distinction. From a security perspective, you could say, like, we're storing unnecessary passwords in a vault which is used for company resources. You could say, like, I don't want that mix, so you would say, like, I want the separate private family account.
I believe Keeper does that.
Yeah, I think so. So they do that. I would be very happy if they would use a password manager for private reasons, to be honest. I wouldn't be mad. The only thing I would say, like, if you leave the company, if we ever migrate from another tool, be aware that data, that specific data, is also kept in a company resource. Meaning, if something happens, well, from a company perspective, I would be able to give myself access to your vault or manage your vault and say, like, you're not getting access anymore to that vault, and it would be very sad to see that you don't have your password anymore for your private account.
So if we take that in consideration, there's no real risk for a company to use it that way. The risk lies with the end user. So anybody who's not an IT or anything else listening to this, it's in their own benefit to have a own personal account. But then again, we just mentioned Keeper. They actually give you, with their enterprise account, a personal account. I think that's a good option for a company, because if for example, you're using another password manager tool, people might start using built-in password manager tools for their own passwords. But then again, what's stopping them from using it for, or reusing it for passwords, or for using it for company passwords?
I do want to add one more thing about the security risk, because if we're talking about password managers, one of the first thing is, if I'm going to allow private and company, the first thing I always keep is, how are people going to access my password manager? If I'm going to allow from a policy perspective, say, like, hey, Adriaan, you're allowed to store your private passwords in our vault. 9 out of 10, you're also going to run into the scenario, I'm going to try to access my password manager from an unmanaged device. Am I going to leave opportunity for this scenario, yes or no? You could say, like, yeah, with conditional access, I need to give that flexibility, because they might end up in a scenario that they need to do that. But I could also say, like, yeah, but I'm also going to allow it from Belgium, for example, or whatever scenario conditional access allows me to. But creating and allowing the mix of private and company data being mixed in the same scenario, well, doesn't feel as comfortable, because people are going to try to authenticate it for different reasons, for reasons that are not linked to my company.
When talking about conditional access, you also talk about single sign-on, because that's a requirement. It also fits neatly in the whole passwordless journey. A user just needs to have a FIDO key, for example, and they can log in to also their Keeper or whatever password manager they use and start their journey that way. And from an IT perspective, you can secure it through conditional access policies, defining, for example, you can only access this from a compliant device, you can only access this from these regions. It fits neatly into the whole story, and that's the biggest benefit.
And what is our standpoint on built-in password manager tools?
From an endpoint point of view, it's very easy. Once you have access to a laptop, you can just read out the passwords within user context. There are PowerShell scripts to do that. It's not that hard. So I would advise not to use it, but like we said before, there needs to be a solution for it. Okay. And you will need to guide people by their hand and tell them, okay, we're not doing this for these and these reasons, but there's an alternative that improves your efficiency, but also improves the security of the company by a lot.
I think I've done some research into that when I was younger. Like if you go to Nearsoft, not going to make any sponsorship though, but if you look at Nearsoft, they specifically
we kind of already did.
Yeah, we specifically have a tab for password manager or password recovery from browsers. There are thousands of tools out of there who can really dump the credentials in clear text. And the reason is by design, the browsers has to figure out a way of how do I store that password? And that's like, yeah, we need to encrypt it. Okay, but how do I decrypt it? Oh, well, yeah, then we have to store that key somewhere else on the device and then use our program to decrypt it at real time so we can do it. But yeah, if we're going to store the key almost next to the fact that to the data we're encrypting, well, it just takes some reverse engineering, and the tools on Nearsoft, for example, are the perfect proof that it's capable of reverse engineering, finding how an encryption method works, and well, basically saying like, well, yeah, this isn't enough. It's good that our users are trying to use a password manager, but from a security perspective, if I look to the next step, if I want to look at malware, compromised devices, maybe if my device is stolen, well, then I'm saying like, yeah, this doesn't cover the risks that I want to cover.
Okay, so to make it a little bit more clear, built-in password manager tools just don't reach the level of encrypting passwords that a third-party tool does. Am I correct?
Yeah, from a security point of view, yeah.
Okay.
There is a way of how you can get your passwords to is by syncing your browser profiles. They are stored like Firefox or Chrome. They allow you to log into your browser, creating a profile, and then it says like, I'm going to store your passwords on your profile. Now the thing is, if we're going to let users rely on that, they're probably going to use their personal account in their browser.
Correct.
I have seen, not with the fact of compromises, but the fact that a device kept getting infected. And it was because of the user always kept signing in into his personal browser, and it replicated over all of the devices he signed in. Now, imagine if I compromise your account, I sign in with your account on my browser, I automatically also download all of your other passwords. Meaning I'm not really in control of where am I replicating, where am I going to allow those passwords to be stored. It's linked to your account. Wherever your account gets signed into, my passwords, your passwords are also going to be synced. So that's also a way.
Okay. It kind of makes me think about a situation we ran into with the company. We did a workshop there about security, and when we were looking at device security, we could see one of their ITers is preparing devices for new users. We looked at it. If somebody was actually infiltrating the new device he prepared for the user. Imagine I'm a new user, I sign in with my personal device on Google Chrome, Edge, whatever. If somebody had access to that device, they also had access to the IT guy's profile, and from there they could just run into anything with the global administrator. So it's, if you think about it, so easy for hackers to have an advantage from there.
True. At the end of the day, you're storing company information on personal accounts.
And I think we're finding more and more arguments to say like, no, I even don't want any private data stored in my company vault. I mean, right now we left the opportunity to say like, well, I understand you want to do that, but now if we're discussing this, I said, no, I don't want that contamination. I want to make sure that my company data is only stored in a company vault, and there's nothing else of personal data into my company vault. I don't want to leave that opportunity. I don't want to create that mindset.
Yeah, true. I completely agree. Okay, so I think we have discussed a few sweet options about why you should use a password manager tool and why you shouldn't use the free options. I think it's always better to look into the paying models, because there are a few very interesting extras you get. Shared passwords, for some your personal accounts that you get as well, or that your users get as well. The keys that you mentioned, Adriaan. The secrets. But maybe more a question to Adriaan now. Once we bought it, how can we install it? How is the progress for a password manager tool to actually set this up?
Well, you have two parts of that. You need to think about, how am I authenticating to the password manager? Then you're talking about managing identities. The answer for that question is simply said, single sign-on, and also some kind of way of automatic user provisioning, in this case, SCIM. The other way is, when you're using an MDM tool, let's automate it. Let's make sure that first of all, the built-in password manager is blocked through using Intune policies, but also let's install the Keeper extension automatically. Even the desktop application, let's automate that. Let's make it as simple as possible. So when, for example, a new employee starts at a company, they just need to open up their device and everything's already done for them. And through the magic of single sign-on, they can automatically log in to their password manager of choice. And it's there. Make it easy for the end user. If you make their life easier, they will start using it and you will reap the benefits security-wise too.
Okay. Is it easy for me to actually manage this? You mean?
It requires some configuration. But once you know how to implement single sign-on and SCIM, it's not that difficult. There are tutorials available online on the sites of the password managers. Also, for example, if you're using Entra ID, you can look it up on Microsoft Learn. Same for Intune. It's a policy. It's not that hard to configure, but you need to know how.
Maybe to add on that, while you're setting everything up, what I also do at the same time, I deploy configurations for the browsers. I disable the built-in password manager. I don't leave the opportunity for them
You actually make policies that
you create a policy making sure that Google Chrome isn't going to provide you with the password manager. The only password manager you will be able to use is the password manager that I provide to you.
I also think from a CISO point of view, this goes hand in hand with creating a firm IT policy. What is our stance on sharing passwords? How do you do this at this company? We also create a guide for them, put it in a knowledge base that's easily accessible for end users, educate them on how to use a personal license associated with an enterprise license, that they can also start using it in their free time. I'm a firm believer if someone uses a tool for the right reasons, they will automatically be more open to the benefits.
Yeah. I follow.
Maybe now if we're into the CISO mindset, like the data that is stored within my key vault, and let's say we're the IT company, we're in a team, which account is very, 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 very valuable. Sometimes they store it in a physical vault, but sometimes they also store it in a digital vault.
Break the glass account.
The break glass account. Yes. Now, if I, as a CISO or IT manager, whoever, and I know I trust you guys, but I might end up needing to know, like, who's going to touch the break glass account? The fact that you read it might be a way that you note it down somewhere else, copy paste it somewhere else. I would like to be informed that as somebody says, like, hey, display me the break glass account, I would say, like, I would like to know, why did you view the break glass account? But because normally it would mean that you open the vault, read the paper, and put it back. Well, this is the start of an emergency procedure.
That's
it might
disturbing.
Be a misclick. Yeah, that's something like I would like to know. Another scenario is like I might have like a bad leaver scenario. Like we're going to say like, Georgie, sorry, I'm going to fire you. But if I can get alerting and knowing like, hey, he exported his vault, he exported his credential vault, I would like to know because there might be common accounts, secrets in there. And where are you going with the export? Am I still in control of that export? Yes or no? And using a cloud-based solution, and if I ingest those security logs, I would be able to detect those things. I would be able to log them into my SIEM and create detection rules on them, because that's a very interesting scenario for me. Who's going to export it? Who's going to access some certain, sensitive information? You could create use cases to discover those things.
I think from a CISO point of view, you're actually in control now. You can take a proactive stance and control it through rollback access controls. You can control each step, but you can also take the reactive approach and audit things. You get insight into what is happening within your environment. And I think that's the most important bit for a CISO, taking back control from an unmanaged situation. Because let's face it, if you're not using a password manager, you're not addressing the real problem. You're not managing it.
Let me take it a step further, which is a very common scenario when we have a breach and an email account is breached. Let's say Adriaan, his account is breached, and we know they signed in. You can see in for example, it's an SSO integrated. Luckily, it's SSO integrated. We can see an Entra ID sign into the password manager from an IP from Japan. Yeah, what's the next step? The next step is going to be, but what did they see? What did they access? Yeah, you will want to know. Or are we going to assume? Well, we're going to assume breach, which you could do, and normally is a great approach. If you don't know anything, assume breach, meaning I'm going to have to reset every password that was in that vault. Luckily, if I have access logs of my password manager, I could say, like, oh, wait, did that IP access that specific key? Great, that's target number one, priority number one, and do your investigation based on that. The more you see, the more you know, the more you can react to it.
That also brings us to a nice benefit, maybe just for the open source tool. I think everyone here knows the site Have I Been Pwned? For example, Keeper has a way to do that within a zero trust model that they can alert you if your password has been found in a data breach, for example.
They call it Breach Watch, I think.
Love that. And what I would even love more is automating that. Give me an alert when a user's password has been found in a data breach, so I can contact that user proactively.
But I do think every user can see it for themselves, and everybody gets an email as well. Good. I mean, it's still user-based. We're still working with humans. It's good to have control, but it's a good starting point that they actually get informed about their password being breached.
Yeah.
I think. Do we agree on that?
I think that if I would be responsible for security, I wouldn't lay that responsibility with my end user. They'll probably ignore it, don't trust it.
They won't do it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we're still working with people.
Humans. So
But it's a good starting point, because you always have users or employees in your company that are proactive and actually do watch that, or actually will come over to IT and ask, hey, I got this email, what should I do? Which is good. Those are the kind of humans you actually need. Otherwise, you can also go to the person and actually talk about it with them, and they will trust you. What I mean with that is, imagine you're a company and you have to contact an end user like, hey, your password has been breached. No end user will trust you unless they would trust anything. Somebody who has had a little bit of phishing training will be like, I'm being phished. So them actually getting an email about it, they might still think that the email is phishing. Then you going over to them and telling them, hey, your account has been breached, will be like, oh yeah, I had an email about that. So that's where I'm a big fan of, because it's a proactive approach, and it's a double proactive approach.
The insights the end user gets, you'll probably also be able to get them as an IT management perspective. So like what the end user sees, I will also see. I think what you also will have is, if I go to you and say like, Jordi, your password of your personal Canva account or your Canva account has been breached.
Or the company account.
Or the company account. And then one of the things you'll always have to explain is, we don't know your password. We know it because it has a match by the password manager and what's online. That I think that's a very big nuance, because from an IT perspective, I'm not interested in your password. I'm only interested in the fact that you're securing it securely and that it doesn't get leaked. As soon as it gets leaked, well, then it's a point of interest for me. It doesn't interest me what the current value is. The fact that the current value is known is enough reason for me to let you change it.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we can end the why question there and open a new topic about it, because Louis here, he has his own podcast called Oeps.
We're talking about common mistakes that are human to be made and that we all can learn a lesson from. Everybody makes mistakes, and the fact that you made a mistake might be very relatable to me, and hopefully I won't make the same mistake as you did.
You won't call it stupid.
I won't call it stupid. I think that there are some smart mistakes, there are some stupid mistakes as well. But out of mistakes, a lot of good things can also come forward.
Don't make the same mistake twice.
Correct. That's what the podcast is about, sharing those mistakes. And I think in the use case of password managers, we have seen in the past some big mistakes, some bigger than others. And I can start with one. And I think it's one of the most known one, who gave a big wave of distrust as well in password managers, to be honest, is the whole LastPass breach. It started in August 2022, where a developer environment was breached. They gained access, were capable of reading some source code and gaining some data from the development environment. LastPass, the announcement like, say, hey, yeah, no, this was contained to the development environment. There was no customer data, production data breached.
Only our own data.
Yeah, and it was irrelevant data. They said, we were just developing stuff. There's no real value in that data. Now, in November 2022, they said they did get more data out of that initial breach. And we did some further investigation, and they did find extra info. And then in December 2022, like a couple of months later, they said we lost some customer data. We lost some encryption. Their vaults were stolen, and now they're there on the internet, ready to be decrypted. And one of the big oopsies they made there is, first of all, I'm not going to say no other company is going to make that mistake. I think LastPass made that mistake, but I think any other company could have that breach. If we look at Microsoft, they also made that mistake. Nobody is secure of that.
That's looking back on the zero trust. Everybody can be breached.
Yeah.
So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But the thing what they did so wrong was transparency and communication. LastPass hid some facts or wasn't transparent from the beginning, which created a big distrust in how they handle my data. And that is one of the big things that a big Oeps is saying, like, hey, I basically failed at the job that you paid me to do so. And I'm going to be very hesitant of showing and being transparent of what's going on. And that puts...
I'm scared for what is coming.
Yeah, but that puts also a big distrust in me. Like, what happened to my data? What do I need to do? Because what was the reaction that everybody needs to do and should do? As soon as it became clear that all of our passwords are somewhere, even though in a encrypted form, I need to change everything. But I'd rather know it immediately than after you telling me 3 months after the breach. That's a big oopsie that I would call.
Well, to add on to that, even in my environment, I still have people who are using it, but even, and I believe it's so true, with passwords, they didn't change. So it's just a personal laziness of, I have to go through all of my passwords and change them one by one, going to the website, change password. It's a hell of a work. Adriaan, do you have...
I have a bit more of an advanced oopsie. It's the story of a company that already is using a password manager, and it exposes the danger of not implementing it in a correct way. It started with the right reasons, namely, like each company, they have a big marketing department and they needed to share the account of their social media accounts. Okay, let's use a password manager for that. But they didn't think about how do we control access to these passwords. The mistake they made is, by default, they made one vault and they gave access to everyone within the company.
Okay.
Even if that person doesn't need access. Let's take, for example, Facebook as a random example. A person working at, for example, catering doesn't need access to the company Facebook account. But if they had access to one password, by default, they had access to their social media account. And that's how a breach happened. Those are the dangers about not implementing it in the right way. Think about, would you want to give access? But ideally, let's automate it. Most companies use either Google Workspace or Entra ID as their main identity provider. Let's use a concept like, for example, dynamic security groups to automate the process of role-based access control.
I think one of the most talked things about right now in security is have the right access.
It's a story about identities in the end. Have that discussion, have a roadmap for that. And a password manager fits nicely into that model because you can control each step.
Yeah. It's completely true. It's just, again, that is just a thing about speak with your employees, speak with your colleagues, speak with everybody who's responsible for their team. Have a conversation with marketing, who needs access to which account, who's responsible for this. Once again, use a password manager tool. And for example, if somebody who has to have access to Instagram, Facebook, goes on a holiday and somebody has to fall in, generate a one-time password or a self-destruct password for 2 weeks, for example.
And also have the discussion, what happens if an account gets breached? There's revenue loss at the end of the day because people, A, cannot do their work, or B, there's image to your personal brand.
True.
Think about the possible revenue loss. Have that discussion too.
And how fast will you notice?
Yeah.
Imagine somebody using your account and you not noticing for 2 weeks. What's the damage they can make? How much money can they use? And
to make maybe a bold statement, companies are willing to spend up to millions on their advertising budget, but are not willing to think about the security.
True. And they rather lose half of that money to some hacker group making propaganda for anything else than actually realizing the danger it gives to their brand name.
Calculate the revenue loss and theory of your business case for a password manager.
Which will cost you only maybe 1/10.
Yeah, a fraction of it.
It's a fraction of that 1 million. Yeah. True. Maybe we can skip to the last part of our podcast. Which impact does this have on your security and general company collaboration? Somebody wants to start?
Like my general collaboration, you meaning like if you give me a password manager, what is going to give me of benefits?
I think
it's more in a way like how can we as a company make collaboration between our employees easier without them having to jump through hooples?
Start with the question like you said before. If you don't have a password manager, ask an end user, hey, you're using the built-in password manager. You have access to, for example, the company's Canva account. Let's take that as an example. Your colleague sitting right next to you also needs access to that account. How are you managing that? How will you do that? Password manager fits neatly into sharing passwords in an easy, for the end user, and secure way.
True.
I think it perfectly summarizes the fact that you provide the option elevates 90% of your issues. The fact that you provide a clear way on how they can do it, just like we had the discussion of shadow IT, providing them the right way to do this will make it work. Again, you'll have people still doing it wrong, but at least you have a right way to point them, a clear policy to do this, and you have a clear instruction like, if you want to share a password, please do it like that. I'll make you a video, I'll make an instruction, maybe we can do a workshop about this, do this on a monthly knowledge sharing somewhere, or maybe on the New Year's reception, everybody gets like a refresher, or we'll do a funny quiz about it. You can really integrate and educate your people around it.
I think that's I know a lot of companies struggle with how their end users are gonna react, how their end users are gonna use it. I think that's the big adding point that I want to give is if you're as a company not sure how can we train our employees, there are companies out there who are specialized in this. Yeah. There are companies out there who know how to handle this and can even help you or help you learn something new.
That also brings us to the topic of change management. The first step of successful change management is creating awareness.
I once had a question of a customer who said like, hey, Louis, could you create videos explaining you how to use the password manager? And we made like 4 chapters, like getting started, creating your password. First, like getting your account for starters. Then creating a password in your vault. Then changing a password in your vault, and then sharing a password with your colleagues. Those 4 steps, they did it in multiple languages. Even with AI, you can basically do it automatically now. Right. But back then, they asked employees to do the translation and they send it out on new employees. They do it as a refresher. They have it on SharePoint ready, and the video was built as first step, do this, then click that, explain what's happening. And all of those users, they learned, not all of them that fluently, but they had all of the tools capable of doing so. That was one of the ways that company approached that.
I agree with Louis, but I also have a prerequisite to that story. And start with, what is a change? And why do I want to change? What's in it for me?
Yeah.
Explain it to your end users before you change it. Yeah. Don't just press the button and then wait till the house burns down.
And also a big part of it, reinforcement. Keep repeating the same message. Monitor their usage.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up this episode for today. I want to thank you, Louis, and you, Adriaan, for sharing your insights. And thank you all for tuning in. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to subscribe and actually share this with your colleagues. There might be some valuable insights for end users in this as well. And it helps us reach more people like you who are passionate about creating a safer digital world. We'll be back next time with another crucial topic in corporate security. Until then, stay secure. Let's work together to secure the future.
See ya.
Bye.